All right, good morning. It's Linh Nguyen, IT-Conductor again. That's our weekly webcast. And today is part 5 of our SACO, the SAP Autonomous Cyber Operations discussion framework. So today's interesting topic around autonomous patching without downtime. So very important topic because everybody know in SAP world anyway, yesterday was another episode of SAP's monthly Patching Tuesday. So the word patching scares people because it involves work, effort, downtime, business impact, etc., etc. So let's talk about that. And last week we covered an important topic around the 4 pillars. We introduced the concept of breaking it down to chunks that we can, categorize and also track the risk associated with the cyber resiliency, right? So 4 pillars being the platform pillar, configuration, the application, and then the identity. So those are important because once, we detect or we find out vulnerabilities, these are the attack vectors, and in them there are components as well associated to most vulnerabilities that are found, where they fall into those categories. And later on in the series, we'll go down even further and dive into what some of these components and how they are essentially tracked and what it means to, from a life cycle, how we assign people to work on those remediation and track them. And they're not all equal, they all different weights, etc. So these are important topics down the line. But for now, having those 4 pillars means that we can now say who's gonna, tackle the remediations that are attached to patching. Not everything is patching, right? So patching, typically when we hear about it, it's on the platform side, but that's not only the place that happens. It does happen. Patching means applying code, not just platform software patches, right? So that's important as well. But before I get into the details of this, I wanted to, today is kind of a big day, and I wanted to cover a little bit of news. I always like to relate to current things that's happening. A few days ago, if you actually have an iPhone or a Mac, you would know Apple actually released some major security updates. And this is kind of unprecedented. Normally, Apple put some of these stuff into their main software updates, right? But the remediation they need to put out is so severe. And this is the one we call about Mac OS. Hackers found vulnerability that they can actually hack into your system, and without actually gaining root access, they're able to do piggyback on the screen sharing, which is very popular, right? And think about how many billions of devices Apple has with people out there. So in any case, the background here is that it's serious enough for them to push out security patch, kind of almost like we would call emergency, right? Because they can actually secure, get into your system and do damage that way. So I found this interesting because, if you're thinking about how often your iPhone gets maybe an update, maybe every few months, right? You don't get this kind of, hey, you need security. And I actually noticed my phone as well, get an update as well, same day as they push out this Mac OS update. So the requirement for patching now is driven by what the market or what the environment is like. That the security vulnerabilities they come out can be very damaging, can be exploited in a matter of hours. And so in response, vendors like, for instance, SAP, of course, having thousands and thousands of customers that potentially could be exploited, need to deal with that in a more urgent manner. It's not something I'm going to wait for my monthly patch, or I'm going to wait for my quarterly patch. So that's something that came to mind. Also, last week, if you're in the security world, you kind of know about Black Hat. So this is kind of the conference in Vegas related to cybersecurity. So I follow a few cybersecurity companies, obviously, but one of my friends, who's the CEO of Hitachi Cyber, it kind of summarized his post here. This is, let me show you who the person is. It's Sam Riemann. He's here in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. So um, I look to him as advisory for a bunch of security related, only in the traditional sense, cybersecurity. But his takeaway, to summarize, is kind of interesting because he felt like this year the cyber environments changed dramatically. So it is very fast in terms of its change speed, volume, and velocity. So typically you'd have companies like, CrowdStrike or Palo Alto Networks, or these guys that do the defending type of capability. They kind of enjoy a little time lag between vulnerabilities and coming out with patches and defense. That window is shrinking so fast now with the AI that essentially there's all these frontier models. The AI is being, either the open source AI models or closed source. The attackers now can explore that very quickly. So we are talking about the ability for these models to understand complex environments faster, right? What does that mean? It's like SAP, we know it's complex. And before, we use complexity as a way to obscure, to hide things. Like I can hide behind a complex set of systems and configuration. When today, as we demonstrated a couple of weeks ago when we tried to exploit the system in a demo, complexity is no longer the barrier because of the intelligence that are in the knowledge in LLMs. You can understand the structure of SAP. It can exploit, it can discover a lot faster. And therefore, having a complex environment doesn't mean that they can't exploit something that's known vulnerability in a matter of hours. So what we're talking about is that they can build their attack path a lot faster, right? We can say, for instance, the research labs work with SAP, they do the CVEs, they research what the patch, the fix is. So it's basically private. Nobody knows about it until they release it. And once they release it, it becomes public. So within a matter of hours after publication, as we know from Patch Tuesday, those are out there in multiple forums, etc. Everybody knows them. So think about it. The AI generation, they can go and say, hey, I go and exploit because there's a fix. I can actually backtrace the fix and see what the exploit is, and I can build the exploit much faster, right? So think about it. If you know there's a vulnerability, you know there's a fix. A lot of that stuff is public information, and you can, whatever your choice of tool is, you can vibe code even an attack vector. And that's what really is the research for penetration testing is about, right? You create these penetration tests and exploit those vulnerabilities. As soon as you know them, you can build code literally in minutes, and then you can probably, if you have the attack surface to look at, you can start exploiting that. So that's what his biggest takeaway. To me, it makes sense, right? You can see the security community in the cyber security community start to have to create defender type LLM. Like, how do we respond to all of these everyday story now? It seems like with some rogue research lab or AI, that's when agent-wise autonomously attack something. So this is the reason why we can't sit back and wait for, I will patch when I have the luxury. I will patch when I have a quarterly or whatever, which is very typical because I say, again, SAP folks tend to hide behind complexity and say, I can't patch because it's complex. We have business, we have very complex systems and interdependencies and infrastructures and teams involved and all that. So here we're to talk about this important topic and why it has to change. The mind set behind that has to change. Otherwise, we basically saying, hey, I'm going to wait until something bad happens and I'll deal with it from a response, which is not really a business protection from a business continuity standpoint. One last thing I want to mention before getting in, it's a big day today. We actually had a press release put out, and today, now the importance of the cybersecurity resiliencies, IT-Conductor has actually now been officially announced on the marketplace. So we are co-selling with our partners, SAP and Amazon Web Services, our solution around protecting customers in terms of increasing their degree of resilience. Again, I want to emphasize, it's not, nobody's going to say, you're never going to be vulnerable, right? Every day changes, every minute changes, but the better you are in increasing your resiliency allows you to be ahead of, being the kind of the target for attacks. So if I'm going to target attacks, I want to target somebody who's kind of relaxed and kind of laissez-faire. So this is where we now essentially applying our automation and kind of orchestration. And again, it's not about tool, it's about the mindset, the framework to move from passive to active. And that means we have to track risk in a way where it provides this end-to-end visibility from the time that a vulnerability is discovered to when a patch is available, to when we can see how it actually applies to our system. Is it applicable? And then what is the steps that need to done for applying that remediation? And then through change management, testing, and all that validation, get it all the way to a fully compliant system, right? So this is our announcement today in the press, and kind of excited to talk about it. All right, so without further ado, I'll go back to the presentation for today in relation to this. One of the things I will talk about, because again, yesterday was Patching Tuesday, and that's why we're here today. If you follow us along, we've kind of introduced this concept, why we need a different approach, and what the approach is. So we break it down part by part, and the patching, today's topic without downtime is important because people think there's always downtime, but we cannot think kind of flat structure like that. It's hierarchical. SAP is not a single stack kind of system, right? It has multiple components. It has a lot of integration, a lot of interdependency. Each component can have vulnerability, but each component can be a different strategy to address resiliency. So yesterday, I said patch day. I don't know, folks are tracking how many patches may be available for the environment, what the strategy is, but I'll touch on this. In fact, I think I might just do that now so we can see. So yesterday's August Patch Tuesday, there were 28 security notes. So compared to July had 16. And when you look at percentage-wise, that's almost 75% increase in 1 month in number of new security nodes. And some of them are kind of way up high here, right? So if you look at a criticality standpoint, there's 4 critical guys up here. That essentially means that it's not only dangerous, but it's also very exploitable. Something that's in the kernel, something is in the code, affecting multiple different software components. Looks like yesterday there were a lot of vulnerability in the manufacturing execution. So if you're running the MES environment, there's a lot of that. So if somebody's going to go through this and say, oh, what's applicable, how do I prioritize that? That's kind of, I put out a post yesterday. Essentially, the way that we approach it is autonomously. A little bit after midnight, I think we have our daily security agent run a automated scan and check. So I'll just show an example here. I guess it might be easier to do this way. So our daily automation goes and does the findings, not only for vulnerabilities, but anomaly detection around the whole kind of identity, access, etc. But let me go back to yesterday, right? So yesterday was analysis that ran a little bit. Actually, the first one, yeah, I think it ran early in the morning. So it already identified that these nodes were available from SAP. So what we do is we already bring them down to the systems automatically, and then we cross-reference them with the vulnerability that's out there versus the system and see what's applicable. So it already found out 6 nodes were applicable from those 28, and those were new, and then what's actually rated, right? So these are something that happens automatically. So what we do from that point on is straight go into remediation mode. When I say that, I mean, like, for instance, our security agent can automatically say, hey, you need to patch because those are known high critical. These are the tickets to track the remediation effort, and automatically assign them to, let's say we have various work queues or work streams that involve with the platform configuration, identity, and also the application side. So what happened is they actually get created. So the security notes here, you can see Patch Tuesday. So every month we have a Patch Tuesday open ticket. And that ticket essentially is created in order for our AI agent to track. So you can see that it automatically create the tickets to track these. And then once we have them, in each of these tickets, there are essentially details on what remediation is, and then it signs them. So think about it as a workflow, right? So it's patching. And then we go into automation mode and say, what of these patches can they be tested in our sandbox? Can they be scripted? Can they be put into our automation library? And then the idea is to get from sandbox development into production quickly, right? And that's kind of what happened here is we have these tickets now open, and somebody is assigned to work on remediation. So if I have, let me just go in here, security compliance desk, we go into patching, and I'm leading up to why we would talk about patching, but let's just say here, we go into one of these, what do they contain, right? So the AI agent creates the ticket, and it knows what components and all CD and all that sort of stuff. Again, later on, we'll talk about how we score all this in terms of the overall resiliency score of the system. We call that the SACO, the SAP Autonomous Cyber Operations. So it's the SACO Resiliency Index, SRI. So another 3-letter acronym there. But later on, we'll introduce that in down episodes later on that. But essentially, each one of these has a score that will go into prioritization, how high of the vulnerability, and then how applicable it is to your environment. So we're not only taking this score, but we apply this to your environment and say, how busy this environment, how important it is in a business context, how exploitable is your environment, do you have controls around this that will prevent people from exploiting this, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say this node is, essentially now in flux in terms of deployment. There are automation that you can apply to that in order to, first of all, apply the node, and then change management to move that node, code fixes into the other systems, right? One of the big findings yesterday also was that a lot of these fixes, this 9.81 is actually a kernel, right? So if you're running in an environment and your kernel is in any of these, it's pretty wide. It's 7.22 all the way to 9.19. So pretty much, I'd say every customer is affected by this. And so this kernel here, then if you review the node and you can check your kernel release, and if it's in the range that you are not at the minimum required, then you got to start thinking about, when am I going to patch this system, this kernel, right? And so let's kind of go back to the discussion here, because if we think about kernel, we talk about SAP, we talk about HANA, we talk about host agents out there that is an entry point for exploration of ports and services. All of these require patching. right? And so I don't have to convince you at this point. Hopefully you understand already. We're not trying to say you can do all this with zero downtime, but I can say that in traditional sense, most customers paid money because they said, we need platform availability, especially in production for high availability, because I cannot take a business outage when machine goes down, etc. But think about it. How often does it go down? Well, most stable environment today are very kind of reliable, not only the old days, but the systems can run for days or weeks or months, even years without actually going down due to a hardware issue. But you've paid for that. If you design for high availability, that is for what we call unplanned. So what happened is when you go towards cyber resilience, you have to think about planned. I know there's a vulnerability. I know there's a patch. So therefore, I need to plan if I want to be resilient. I want to plan to roll that one out. So now we're talking about not saying unplanned. We're saying plan. So in plan, you can say, hey, if my system's designed and I never actually use it because the hardware didn't go down, why don't I leverage that architecture to give me ability to do patching with minimized downtime? We talk about minimized downtime also in the context of upgrades, right? If you're going from ECC to S4 or patching S4, doing support packs and you're doing, all kinds. If you're doing that already, why not build in parallel a cyber resiliency availability plan, right? So this is kind of what we're saying here. There's not saying that true downtime exists everywhere. Zero downtime, right? There could be minimal downtime. There could be kind of a scheduled downtime. So when we do work for customers to manage the service level, it's like we only not only take care of unplanned, but also planned downtime. So planned downtime means I have a maintenance window. I publish it. I've notified my customer base. And then I go into a maintenance window, like maybe a weekly restart or whatever it is, a weekly window where I move transports or whatever. That is a plan window. So plan, once you have a plan agreement in your service level, you can do anything in that maintenance window, right? So let's say I have 1 hour a week, and I've already have this in my service level. The business knows I need to take this for maintenance. So that maintenance should be leveraged in order for you to be cyber resilient. So we're not talking about say, never going to go down, right? So depending on the component. So let's go forward and talk about it in detail. So designing systems for high availability means you can have different components, because different components with SAP have different infrastructure and different architecture, right? So most of these can have live patching. Host agent can get patched, restart. Web dispatchers, yes, you can have a active and a standby with a load balancer, right? You can do that. You can have cloud connectors can also the same thing. You can have automatic failover, HA pair, right? SAP route is the same way. So you can have two paths, two routes. You can actually route the one route to the other, have both IP and register with SAP. So those can have it, right? And then the app server, we already know. So if you're running production, most designs say that you should not have only one, the primary app server. You need to have additional app server, right? So AAS, why? Because of high availability. So if you have that, and you can have a scheduled maintenance, why can't you drain users out of one, restart it with a kernel patch, and then go to the other one, right? Add it into login group. So these are designed, can be patched live, right? SAP kernel themselves, again, the design in the old days say, hey, do I share SAP kernel across my systems? Do I have local executables? And the thought originally was, hey, to simplify operations, I can have centralized and then everybody mounts them and then they use them. But in the concept of having rolling kernel, you should have local executables, right? So everybody has local kernel executables. Then in that case, what you have is the ability to patch one app server at a time. So that's what we call rolling kernel update, if you will. You can patch, restart, patch, restart, patch, restart. And the last one would be the message server kind of thing, where you patch the message server if you need to. And even that has high availability. You can fail over message server to a cluster node and then back. Same thing with the NQ. So we talk about ASCS, ERS, right? So all of these are well documented, designed for high availability, right? Moving down lower to the level of where the database, where your, I guess, enterprise gems are, right? Your data that the thieves are after. That's the database. We talk about HANA because that's, that's for HANA. It's kind of a common goal for a lot of customers now. But I mean, we're talking about like maybe Oracle, SQL. They all have high availability architecture. And with that, there's always a best practice to allow you to patch one node, right? Normally the standby node gets patched first, right? And then you do a takeover, and then you patch the other node, then you fell back. So these again has been designed, has been tested. I've been worked on many HA clusters for HANA, where we do this kind of level for patching the database without taking a full outage. There's still a minor time when it does the takeover, but we're talking about a couple minutes, right? If that, and then maybe a couple minutes back. Okay. The other component, again, gateways, all of these one are minimals. They can all be addressed in that scheme. So go towards thinking about the components, what can be protected. If you have this built-in plan for business continuity, leverage that and then build into cyber resilience. So some stuff that we talk about, maybe on storage, you need to take an outage, right? So if you're doing a major storage upgrade, if you're using a cloud storage, you maybe have to worry about it. But if you're using your self-managed storage, you need to do an upgrade on the firmware or something like that. Kernel updates for OS, for instance. For instance, if you're running SUSE Linux for SAP, there are KGraph, there's live patching. You can pay the license to have live patch. So most software gets patched without having to take it down, right? You can run two different software at the same time, right? And then at some point where it's idle, it gets to restart the service. But from an OS kernel, you're running from one Linux kernel to the other, and you need to patch and then schedule restart. Again, that is manageable, but it is a restart. But again, if you're having this on multiple servers, there's no reason why you couldn't do this across the board, do one at a time, right? So this is an important concept here, that if we are dealing with patching, we're not dealing with functional changes. These are maintenance changes that have minimum impact on testing and regression. There's no business testing required. There's a validation, but there's no business testing required to say, I can't do this because I don't have business to test my end-to-end process. No, this is a structural infrastructure patching activity, right? So let's go look top down. So from the way the users come in, they hit the load balancers. We talked about multiple web dispatchers, right? We're talking about different application server tiers, databases, and then we have a message server and the NQ server, so you don't lose your logs. All of that has cluster ability, right? And then we have replication, not only primary replication to secondary, but tertiary too. If you have DR, I worked on several projects where business continuity demands the DR, and the DR is actually a real standby. It's not once a year I turn it on and replicate and do a DR test, but it's always on what we call asynchronous mode. They're ready there to take over, shoot the primary and secondary in the primary region, fail all over. So there's no reason why you can't test patching there as well, right? So you can test patching in your DR, test, apply it, works well, go apply it on your primary, right? Again, so this is possible. Don't say it's not possible. Done it? Okay, so when we use the intelligence to detect there's a vulnerability, right? We know all the SAP components, all the versions. The dependency means a structure, what in IT-Conductor we call a service tree. A service tree means I offer finance. Finance runs on S4. S4 has these servers and components, and these components talk to other related systems. So then you can say, if I'm going to do this maintenance, what is the required outages on component level, right? Not just the system level. And then from there on, you assign the different automation to address each of those patching. So it's not all at once. So for instance, if I know there's a SAP router, last month there was a SAP router vulnerability. I mean, most of the time, who cares? Just tag the maintenance patch SAP router, right? Think about it. SAP router is kind of like a firewall to your SAP systems for many cases. You can tag that outage, do that, and automation exists to update the software. Any of these are now today automatable through software as a kind of a infrastructure as code, right? So we've done things like Ansible, Terraform, scripting, etc., all of that, and can be scheduled via process automation. Now, again, we revisit the Patch Tuesday. As we know, all of that potentially, we don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag every month. Like, what are we going to hit? What are we going to hit? Definitely something the last several months has always been an SAP kernel, right? And occasionally there is a component like the SAP router, and there's a component for Cloud Connector, and et cetera, et cetera. So whatever it is, if we are mapping the entire environment with the versions, we know what is exposed, what is a vulnerability, what's applicable. That would then correlate with what we are able to do. If it's a minor version update, same thing, and you already have the automation process to do that, then you can use that automation to patch. So test once, patch everywhere, right? If we're talking about more like agent or these kernels, all these things actually today, for instance, we monitor like the kernel, not only the kernel release, but the kernel patch level, right? So we know whether your patch level, in fact, the example was when we looked at the patching Tuesday yesterday, in our IT-Conductor lab, we have our S4 system, and we upgraded since the last patching Tuesday. So our patch level for the kernel, like 916 there, is at patch level 100. Yesterday, the kernel required was like 96 or something like that. So the benefits of staying on top of this is that even vulnerabilities come out, you may be already higher level. Because remember, SAP knows about this stuff. It's not like they just publish the same day they know about it. This vulnerability may have been known for the past month. It's been worked on, and the patch might have come out even before that. So if you stay on top of this and apply it on strategically, when these vulnerabilities come out, you say, is my impact? No, there's no impact because I'm already at a higher level, right? So all of that stuff is better planning. And then from a database version, this is complicated because yes, database, if you're going to upgrade major, you do need an outage. But if you're doing just a small level patch, revisions, you're doing all that stuff, there's a dependency between SAP kernel as well as the database, right? So they call in the kernel the database dependency libraries. All of it needs to be able to do in orchestration to make sure that the kernel matches what the database library. So if you update the database library, maybe you need to update the client and all that sort of stuff. That needs to be considered in the dependency. But if you're on RISE and SAP is doing it for you, etc., you just need to be aware that, hey, I know there's vulnerability. You can ask SAP, when is this thing going to be applied? Or if you already pay for their cloud, the additional CAS services, right? So the cloud application services, they can actually tell you that they have something scheduled for this weekend, etc. Used to be working with RISE all the time. We would have meetings with them on a weekly basis as a partner and say, hey, you know what? I know this patching Tuesday come out, so they already on the notice that they need to patch. They need to synchronize with your schedule. But typically it would be like this coming weekend type of thing if it's something that's very high in terms of the critical list, right? So we talk about host agent. There's no downtime. Do it. Cloud Connector, Web Dispatcher, if you design properly with, and again, most of these machines are small, right? They're not talking about like, why should I have only one Web Dispatcher? Why should I have only one Cloud Connector? These are like tiny VMs, right? It's not like I have to pay big HANA 2 terabyte instance. There's no reason not to design this into cyber resilience, right? It's not only smart for that, but it also gives you that business continuity as well. Application server is the same thing, right? We say, hey, train the user, do the update, do a rolling, add it back into the group, verify. So users themselves are not actually affected. You take them out of the logon group, and then you do the update, right? Batch jobs, if they are on batch job, you train the batch, stop, make sure no batch jobs are running on there, and then do it. So yes, it does require orchestration, but that's the whole point. Is this is not free. There's no free lunch. You need to plan, you need to architect, you need to orchestrate, and to do that in a way where it's a continuous operations. That's why we are preaching more of a continuous operation, not once a month, and then you don't have resources to do it, right? Already talked about all of these other HANA, so I'm going to skip forward. So HANA and message server, all that stuff can have very little fail over time when you take over, orchestrate it. Each of these layers, again, you can validate, right? So in a maintenance window, today we see customers resisting the planned downtime because they say, oh, that's too much. I have 20 systems. I don't have enough people to stop them. I don't have enough people to actually meet that maintenance window. So they skip it or they do it in little batches. The problem I see with that is that if you're not using automation, stopping system requires somebody to get on somewhere and running a script or entering a command. That stuff should be orchestrated already. You could have a set run book to stop systems, start system in the right order. That way, when you're doing patching, you're just running automation. You know, if stopping should not take longer than, let's say, a few minutes, right? So that the majority activity is actually doing the patching and not stopping, coordinating. I got to stop this manually, hop onto this. That's also a security issue too. If you have so many people with console access to systems, that is actually a problem when we do security reviews. Like, hey, too many people have too much access to too many systems, and that's actually a problem. So if you use automation, you will reduce that as well. The risk of having kind of like attack surface on the OS. We all know that from the demonstration I did was like, you know, if I get into the OS, I can do a lot of stuff there. So again, if your Windows 1 hour and you're spending most of your time manually stopping, starting, and validating, and not actually patching, you may blow out that 1 hour, right? Example, last weekend, actually, there was a cloud AOM maintenance window for at least IT-Conductor. We got notice from SAP. They started late. They said, you know, they put out the notice, I think it was 2 weeks beforehand. Came the window, nothing happened. So they sent out a bulletin saying they're starting late, like 24 minutes late or something like that. And then they ran that, and so the window got slipped. Why is that, right? It's probably because it's done manually. It's not scheduled. It's not automated. If it's on schedule, it should never be late. It's like schedule hits, the whole thing gets automatically stopped, and then you can do your maintenance activity and then bring it up. And the validation, if business is ready, run your critical reports and make sure everything's running, all the integration gets connected, right? So that's move forward, right? Like kernel, if it's something goes wrong when you bring up validation, then roll back. So the kernel backup should be automatically, right? So you already have a kernel backup before you apply the new patch. And if your validation fails, roll it back. All of this should be part of the standard automation playbook, right? So this is what we're talking about. We do the patch, we do the health check, it pass, no, roll it back, right? And then get another window if you don't have enough time to redo it again. If yes, you continue on. And all of this stuff should be, so for instance, health check for system should not be manually, somebody, you know, logging in and checking manually. It's system. If you have 5 systems, let's say a typical customer might run, say, ECC, BW, CRM, or something like that. You know, if you don't have enough people because they're already under pressure to do the actual, you know, patching window, it's too much for them to actually go and validate afterwards. So have that already part of automation, monitoring, right? All of these things should be part of this. My dashboard look green. Is everything back online automatically without me having to go log into every system and check, right? So that is kind of the basics around shrinking the need for a large time window. Because if you go into business all the time asking for a larger window, what are you going to say? No, right? Then you're not going to go patch. But if you can say, I can manage this in a small window because I have automation around the before, during, and after, then you got it kind of a better deal there to negotiate that time. So where do you stand today? Again, it's a question. What is your capabilities, in your environment, with your team, with your infrastructure, with the way that you have managed services, etc. So if you do manual patching, it takes hours, right? So automated stuff can be going minutes, right? Rolling application servers could be a few minutes, right? Replication fell over, it's like 2 minutes, right? If you're using instant validation from dashboard, when everything's up within 30 seconds, I know everything's working automatically, right? I don't have to do anything, right? That is kind of saving, and already savings in bits and pieces in your complex infrastructure adds up. It adds up to a lot. So that's why, again, going back to asking business for downtime, you may have hours every quarter or something like that. You can eat into that very easily if you're not maximizing each of these steps through automation. And that's why, from a maturity model, you have to assess your current capability today and find a gap and get the biggest ROI to address the efforts and the cost of putting into, whether it's the infrastructure to add additional resiliency, or it's the process, or it's the procedure, or the people training, whatever it is. You got to get to a point where you can patch in little time, if any, in terms of downtime. So putting it all together for us means this: in discovery, right? We have to be able to know all the components moving around SAP environment for you, not for somebody else, because you can take some reference architecture, but like, I don't have that. I don't have this. I have this. So what you have needs to be mapped and understood, and needs to be pingable, attributable to some real-time intelligence about what component, what versions, what patch level you have, right? And then once the known risk comes out, immediately this risk in terms of vulnerability are matched against your environment. And then you get scored. You score like, hey, this is a 9.8 on CVSS, but in my environment, it's like a 10 because it hits my, central finance and manufacturing system that is running 80% of my business. So that, in terms of risk correlation, puts a heavy weight. So if you got something that is an exploitable vulnerability, but has very low weight in your environment, then you can deprioritize it, right? Because that just affects my sandbox or whatever. It's like only two users. That becomes very low risk. And so everything has to get kind of measured in that weighting, the context of it, right? And once you have that identifies of risk and prioritize, then you move into change planning, right? So again, if you don't know what to do in terms of steps to patch, if you don't know who to talk to, what groups are going to do it, what are the change requests need to put in place, how much time do I need to notify, what do I need to check for, health before and after, all that stuff, that needs to get worked out, so that when comes so again, I'm not saying that you can say, I don't have any vulnerability, I won't ever have to patch. Just know that it's there. It's going to be there. It's part of the operation. It's a reality. So if it's there, plan for it. What is the change sequence when I need to do this? Who do I need the approval? What are the teams involved? Should they be on the approval workflow and all that sort of stuff? That gets into the change management. All right. And then we talk about execution, right? So again, if you have the infrastructure, you have a strategy, you build it and you tested it, and you've done this already for business continuity planning, DR planning, all that stuff. Now just add resilience to it. Like, I need to do this more often in a planned manner, right? So in a planned manner, what do? I have these whatever automation or run books or people assigned to do some things that goes into the execution mode. And then I talked before, autonomous validation. It needs to be part of that health check, right? To give business confidence. When do I tell people it's safe to go back in the system? If I ask for 30 minutes, it needs to be 30 minutes or faster. And to do that with confidence needs to mean like not just doing the patch, but validating it, right? And then making sure system is the same as what it was before. That means before your patch, you have enough resources. If you're doing an OS patching and you don't have storage, or you have a CPU issue or something like that, that needs to get remediated beforehand so that the system can return to healthy state after your validation of the patch, right? And then from there on, you measure and you monitor and you say, hey, look, these are my change records. These are performed according to the time and the process. And then what is the remeasured calculation in my cyber resiliency, right? So if I had a CV ESS 9.8 and weighted risk in my environment is 100, now it's reduced to 3 or something like that. So these are continuous assurance number to say that what's as a problem has been solved and that is continually maintained in that good health status. And that's what we're talking about in terms of doing your SAP autonomous cyber operations, not just doing one thing well, but doing everything connected together, because thieves, they don't care. Bad actors, they don't care how good you are at kernel patching, how good you are in identity. They care to exploit the whole chain, and the weakest link in the chain is what they get in on, right? They don't care. Their goal is very specific: to access, to do damage, to exfiltrate data. And they really focus on that. They don't care about everything else. So you have to care about protecting your weakest link in that whole chain of dependency, how you maintain your end-to-end operations around cyber resiliency, right? Again, the takeaway I want to talk about today is that there's no excuse in today's world to say I can't patch because it's too much impact and it's too much downtime, and I don't have enough time and my Windows only and out. So start working on that, right? Everything else can be controlled, and we're talking about control here. So the more control you have over your environment, the better you are in postures to be resilient, right? The less control, obviously, is like, I don't know. I don't even know who does this. I don't know, when we do this, how often we do this, what is the policy around this. So get all of that in place so that you have more control. The more control you have, then you can shrink the requirement around patching and staying up to date for cyber resiliency. So that's really the takeaway today. And let's see if we have, next sessions, I think should be up already for registration. I wanted to talk about, I think, the next episode. Let's refresh here. So I think next week we're talking about number 6, detect, decide, remediate. Again, this is a continuous cycle workflow. We kind of dumb it down to a few basic major phases in that whole cycle, just as we demonstrated in the Patching Tuesday. Something we know happens on a periodic basis. Let's go ahead and detect what's there. Let's decide what to do, and then go ahead and do that. And then within whatever shorter time frame, and you can actually address these issues. And so that's coming out. I think we're going to send out as a reminder to that once we publish this recording as well. I will text some questions if there's any questions. Be happy to discuss them further with you. Oh, yeah, and if you actually do want to assess where your capability are today, again, we are kind of doing kind of assessment as part of the SACO kind of initiative. So if customers care about like, hey, where do I map in this? Where do I sit? How can I improve my resiliency? We'd be happy to kind of run an analysis and then find out where you are today, and look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans on getting you more cyber resilient. And that's an open request, and for me to kind of extend out to you as an invitation. Feel free to reach out to me and the team, and we'll be happy to do that. All right, one question, Wolfgang. Yeah.
So from your product perspective, is when this nodes are being applied, are they taking consideration of like dependencies for other nodes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
How do you
nodes.
handle that type of scenarios?
Yeah, nodes are interesting thing, right? Nodes can be either node assistant based. That means like SAP publish a node, but a node might be, say, an SAP kernel, which you don't do anything inside of S node. You go and download and you schedule your kernel patch. But most nodes in SAP that are, I would say, code or configuration related, So you see the nodes will be like I explained, there are 5 nodes, 6 nodes in our environment. Yesterday we had Patch Tuesday that we said automatically is critical high and it's applicable. IT-Conductor already checked the nodes in the system. It's already downloaded the node to the system automatically and said these nodes are ready for implementation. And so depending how we automate that, the ready for implementation means that you can do it in your development environment or your sandbox, and then you transport them up to the other systems, right? You don't actually go in and apply the node in production. So for a one-time effort in development, so what our research lab does is we actually apply the nodes. We have ability to automate the node for you if it's a simple node, but if it's a complex node where there might be 5 dependency pre and post and some manual steps, then those ones, obviously the way SAP design them, we can't do the whole thing automatically. But for most nodes, they have a very specific prereq. Like if you're not a certain, patch version of something, they require you to put that one in beforehand, or you need to do something right afterwards. But in most cases, we're talking about, I would say 70% of the nodes, they're fairly straightforward. If your system, now there's a gap between if you haven't done this on a regular basis, we go into a customer and say, hey, I haven't patched since my last support pack update 9 months ago or something like that. And there's a bunch of nodes, and then the nodes say, hey, you need this component, that component. There is some level of work to get the system up to a base, like a SAP basis support pack level, certain things that get to that level where not a lot of infrastructure dependency is there anymore. Then the node is simply to patch the vulnerability. So in our case, what we do is we take the node, we see the dependency. If there's no dependency, we automate the node. The node can be applied across multiple systems with same components or similar components. And then we use our automated change management to capture the change. And then we use change management workflow to then schedule approval to get them up to the QA prod environment quickly through CHAI, which is our change automation intelligent product. But from what we do is the nodes themselves, we try to automate. I'd say 60-70% of them can be automated. And that's what our effort is to say, yes, not everybody want to sit there in front of S-Node and apply them and get change. Because if you don't analyze them, what happens is you start, I need authorization to do this node. And then you find out there's like 5 dependency. And then now you got to go back and ask whoever to approve these other nodes to get put in. So it's best to go the analysis first and then create the plan to actually implement them.
And those analyses are automated from your tools that you provide, right?
Yeah, so what we do is we do pull, so it's part tool and part of our service. The tool will pull down, it's already analyzed, ready for implementation or not applicable. So we do that. And then if our lab, so we take the node and we say, our lab will apply that node and see how complex that node is, right? And then our lab will say, okay, well, this node can be automated. And then we actually have the automation that can be released to the customer so they can take that automation and apply it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, I think it's been a good discussion. I think this topic here, again, we kind of have to re-emphasize it's a structural change in how we typically used to operate whenever you have to think about this stuff. And now we have to think about it a lot more often, and we want to make sure that you understand the basic concepts as we build on top of these topics week after week. So I appreciate everybody's attendance. And again, just hit us up if you have any questions. It's a big community out there now talking about cyber security for SAP. So I wanted to make sure that we include any concerns or feedback you might have, and things you want to talk and discuss about. We'd be happy to do that as well. Thank you very much.